Trans Mountain expansion project clearing another hurdle. The Federal Court of Appeal has dismissed a challenge from First Nations. They argued they weren't adequately consulted before the pipeline was approved for a second time. In their unanimous decision, the judges said there was no evidence that the Trudeau government's ownership of the Trans Mountain pipeline influenced the approval, and there was no basis for the court to interfere. Meantime, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says the ruling helps create certainty for future projects.
It demonstrates that the vast majority of Indigenous groups will not have their voices ignored by a couple of foreign-funded special interest groups. It demonstrates that we do have the rule of law, that decisions can be made, that big projects can be completed.
News of the court ruling came as a blow to those First Nation groups opposed to the pipeline. They're vowing to continue the fight.
This government is incapable of making sound decisions for our future generations. So we are and we will. Even for their children, we will take those steps to make sure that Canada stays the way it is.
Well, clearly, the pipeline industry and the energy industry happy with the decision. Let's discuss that now with the head of the Association for the Pipeline Business in this country, Chris Bloomberg, joins us. Good to see you, Chris.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
All right, so I'll get your initial reaction. Obviously, I'm anticipating not only is this good news for the industry, but do you feel now that this expansion project, for all that has been through, is actually going to reach completion at some point?
Yes, we're very confident that this is going to proceed. I think there's two court decisions that were extremely important, not only for Trans Mountain, but for the energy pipelines and for resource projects overall. I mean, the assertion of federal jurisdiction under the court's determination under the whether or not bitumen can be moved in the pipeline, that was a very resounding affirmation of federal jurisdiction. This recent ruling really clarifies, and it's hard to underestimate the importance of this. It clarifies the federal requirements and that the federal government has engaged and consulted appropriately. That's going to have a far-reaching effect.
I guess one of the points that was made here as well is the sense that while there is consultation, and it is mandated consultation, that is not giving opponents a veto. You'd be consulted, but you might not get your way.
Yeah, I think there's a high standard for consultation and engagement that through the process on these pipelines, both the companies, the provinces, it wasn't the issue with those consultations. It was more with the federal government's consultation, and now that's been clarified. So the court took extra care and steps to identify that these processes are not to be used for ongoing, endless appeals and so on. It's not a perfect process, but there is a standard for adequate consultation, and I think the court is really, for all resource development across the country, it has a Canadian impact. It sets the standard for those types of consultations and defines that this is not a veto.
Do we feel that this decision, I mean, coming out of the Federal Court of Appeal, the sense of the regional divide, and we saw it rear its head quite dramatically in the last election with the Trudeau Liberals being shut out of that part of the country. Is it decisions like this that gets the oil patch trusting the politicians, the judges in Ottawa a little bit more?
Well, I think you got to just make a distinction between the courts and the politics. I mean, the courts opine on law, and they have affirmed quite clearly the law around jurisdiction and the law and the responsibility around consultation. So I think what the courts have done have provided clarity, as Premier Kenney has said, clarity around what is the nature of things and how do we proceed going forward. The political side is different.
Okay, different in the sense that the Liberals obviously are trying to mend those fences. Chrystia Freeland going into the
Yes.
Heartland, Jim Carr. Is that having any impact with the pipeline companies in this company? Are they sort of feeling better about this government because of moves like that?
I think it's had a neutral effect. I don't think it's really moved the needle a lot. I think we need much more engagement and clearer definition of the oil and gas industry's role in the economy in Canada. We need a vibrant statement or kind of narrative from the federal government that this is part of the economy going forward, an important part, and there's a role for oil and gas in the future as we evolve our energy portfolio in Canada. That's what we need.
When I think about that relationship of the East-West divide and the mistrust that we're seeing, Teck's Frontier mine, this seems to be the next big sort of, I guess, challenge as to what is this government's commitment, I guess, to the oil sands.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that these things proceed and the Teck mine gets approved. I mean, our companies are the companies that move the production. So in terms of planning for the future and the needs for the infrastructure of the energy industry, that's going to be important to get some clear direction on that. So we're hopeful that has a positive outcome.
In terms overall, we take a look at progress that is being made on pipelines. We've had some positive headlines in recent weeks. Are we getting more comfortable with the idea that we're finally going to start moving that Alberta product, either it be to Tidewater, either it be to the United States, our largest trading partner? We've had a lot of stumbles in both directions in recent years.
Right. It's been kind of a case of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. I think we took a big step in the early 20s of this new decade. I mean, Enbridge, the Minnesota court approval of the pipeline to proceed, that's a major step. Trans Mountain, XL, these projects are moving ahead, and they are vital to our economy and vital to our industry. So we're very confident that these are going to move ahead, and we have, with these court decisions, much clearer, far-reaching impacts of how the process is going to proceed in the future. So we're looking at it very optimistically. We have Coastal GasLink also moving ahead, and the LNG and natural gas business. Our industry has a lot to develop and grow, and I think we're getting some traction on that.
Now, when it comes to legal battles, they can be won, they can be lost. This one was a victory for the project, but of course, the opponents have not said they're going to back down. They're going to continue to fight. Federal Court of Appeals, a high court, but there's one higher than that. Are you anticipating this fight to drag on?
Well, if you look at the court decision and the manner in which they came down, it was unanimous, and they really articulated, in some cases, the overreach of the previous appeals court, and they set out kind of the broad path going forward. So it was a very emphatic statement and broad-based statement around how this process on consultation is to proceed, what it's meant for, and again, it's not meant to be a perfect process, and it can't be used for ongoing intervention and kind of obfuscation. There is a point at which, and I think the standard has been set for what it takes to have the proper consultation. So I think it's going to be very difficult to overcome the very broad and very definitive approach from the court in this decision. So it's law now.
All right, interesting times indeed. Thanks for joining us, Chris, for your time and for your insight.